It's my good pleasure this morning to introduce Brother Eddie Clower. He comes to us from Searcy, Arkansas. He has been involved in the work there at Searcy with Harding University and preaching around the area. And also, he began a good work. It was set upon his heart to begin this work, Proof of the Day, that we learned about in Bible class. I preached through the book of Matthew last week. I finished with the Great Commission. And I appreciate you just following up on that, and it's a great lesson on that. We know he has done many good things. His resume is probably I was thinking about that. The best thing he put on his resume is that his children are faithful and workers in the vineyard of the Lord. Like the Apostle John said, I have no greater joy than to hear my children walk in truth. And that's a good work y'all did there. And continue on with your children. Now, to turn it over to Brother Eddie.
Thank you very much. Really, the best thing you can say about me is I married Susan Finn. And she's seated right down here. Thank you so much for your kindness to me. You allowed me to speak in Bible class about the far-reaching works of Truth for Today. And now you've allowed me to speak during the worship service, delivering the sermon that we have here. A number of years ago, I was in a meeting in Birmingham, Alabama. During that meeting, I was able to interview Jerry Jenkins, who was the great preacher of that congregation. In our conversation, I said to Jerry, could you tell me why it was you started preaching? Could you tell me how it all got started? And he said, I can. I can summarize it by saying that I'm a preacher today because of my grandmother. Then he began to tell me the story of his grandmother. He said, my grandmother married when she was very young. She had just finished high school, and she married a young man who was only 19 years of age. Neither one of them was a Christian. They decided they were going to have a home without God. So they found a little house to live in the suburbs of Birmingham. And a little ways away was a small congregation of the Church of Christ. Back in those days, every year, a Church of Christ would have a gospel meeting. And this little church was in the process of having a gospel meeting. And he said somehow or another, his grandmother went to that meeting. We don't know how she found out about it. It could be that somebody told her about it and took her. We don't know. But she was really impacted by the sermon. She came home and told her husband about her experience. And she said, I believe that tomorrow night I'm going to go back and I'm going to become a Christian. And I would really like for you to join me so that we can have a Christian home. She was shocked by the way her husband responded to that request. He said, oh no. He said, I'm not going to become a Christian. He said, I've thought about it before and I've decided that I'm not going to be a Christian. Furthermore, he said, I'm not going to allow you to become a Christian. If you go over there tomorrow night to become a Christian, I won't let you have the car. You'll have to go over my dead body almost. Well, she cried. She cried during the nighttime. And the next day, she cried much of that day. But she made up her mind, I'm going to become a Christian. So when evening came, she walked over to the little church building where the worship service was taking place. And when she got there, she went to the first man she saw. And she said, I've come to become a Christian. He said, well, you know, we do not have a baptistry in our little building. But I'll tell you what we will do just as soon as you respond to the gospel. We'll take you over to a nearby church where there is a baptistry and we'll baptize you there. So during the worship service, she listened attentively, and at the end of it, she responded. And they took her over to this baptistry that was located nearby and baptized her, prayed for her. and a couple brought her back to her house and dropped her off. It was dark. She didn't know whether her husband was there or not, but she went in and looked for him, and pretty soon she found him. He was back in the bedroom. He had already gone to bed. He was asleep. She awakened him as she sat there on the edge of the bed, and she said, "I wanted to tell you that I became a Christian tonight, and I'm going to really live the Christian life. Now, I'll be the best wife you can imagine, and I'm hoping that one day you'll want to join me and become a Christian." He just grunted and rolled over and went back to sleep. Jerry said that she told him many years later that he wouldn't speak to her for 3 days. But finally, they got to speaking to one another, and they continued their lives together. She never missed a worship service. She was there for every Bible class. She was there for every worship service. And finally, they gave her a little class to teach, a class for the little children. She loved it very much, and she taught a little class like that the rest of her life. She had to quit just before she died. She wasn't able to do it anymore, but she gave her life to teaching the children. By and by, the Lord blessed them with 2 girls and 2 sons. She did her very best to make sure that those boys and those girls were in Bible class, every Bible class that took place, and also in every worship service that took place. She went to the preacher and she said, "Now you're going to have to help me. You're going to have to solicit help from the whole church, because I want these children to be reared as godly children. It's going to be hard for me to do it. My husband's not going to help me. I want you to help me all you can." So eventually they put together little training classes, a training class for the young ladies, a training class for the young men. The 2 young men learned how to lead prayers. They learned how to put together a little lesson for Wednesday night. They learned how to help serve the Lord's Supper. Eventually, those children grew up, and it was time for them to start thinking about college. The oldest girl said she wanted to go to Atlanta Christian, which was a 2-year college. She didn't have the money to go, so she worked at a grocery store or some other kind of store and saved the money. Pretty soon, with the scholarship she got, she was able to go. And at school, she met a fine Christian young man, and they married. And so it was with her sister, who also went to Alabama Christian. She also met a fine Christian young man. The 2 young men decided that they wanted to go to Freed-Hardeman University. At then, it was Freed-Hardeman College, and it was only 2 years in length. But they had an emphasis on preaching, and they thought maybe they can teach us to preach. And these 2 young men got opportunities to preach for small congregations nearby, and pretty soon they were doing pretty well as preachers. They graduated from Freed. One of them was Jerry's father, who was a preacher. And as he grew up in that home, he was taught continually about preaching. He said, "That's when it all started for me. It started with my grandmother." Well, I said, "Jerry, that's the most wonderful story that I've ever heard. It's just an ideal story in my judgment. But I want to ask you one question. What happened to your grandfather?" He said, "Well, he was 70 years of age. And one Sunday morning, he said to his wife, 'I'm going to take you to church.' She was shocked. They had never gone to church together before. She quickly finished getting ready to go, got in the car, and they went to the little church building. He said, 'Now, I'll not go in during the Bible class because I'd have to sit alone. You'll be in teaching your class. But whenever the classes are over, I'll come in, we'll sit together.' She didn't know what was going to take place. She went to the preacher, and she said, 'My husband's out there. He's doing something really unusual. He's going to come into the worship service. I don't know what's going to take place. You be ready for anything. He has been very hostile against gospel preaching and New Testament Christianity.' The classes ended, and she met him, and they sat together. They had their song service, and then they had the sermon, And when they were singing the invitation song, he went to the front. And the preacher received him. And he said to the preacher, I don't know if Jesus will have me or not, but I'm ready to become a Christian. They baptized him upon his confession of Jesus as the Christ. And after his baptism, they had the Lord's Supper with him. And at the end of the service, everybody in that small congregation came by him and congratulated him on his decision to become a Christian. One man came up to him and said, I want to ask you something. I've been sort of praying for you for the last 51 years. I've wondered why you waited so long. I've talked to you a time or two, and you always just walked away. He hung his head and said, well, I think I had to see somebody really live the Christian life. And before long, the example of my wife has just gotten the best of me, and I decided that I was going to become a Christian. It's a wonderful story, but remember, it's just half of a Christian home. If it is true that a lot of good can be done by a Christian home that's just half a Christian home, then just think about the good that can be done with a complete marriage. This was a half of a marriage that you heard about. I want you to picture in your mind the complete marriage. And the way I'm going to do it is by using two passages. They're both in the Old Testament. One is very familiar to you, and that would be Proverbs 31:10 through 31, which is about the excellent wife, the ideal wife, Mrs. Far Above Rubies. It is a poem. It is a Hebrew poem. It's an acrostic poem. All 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are used. And maybe you can say that 22 characteristics of her are given. The other passage you may not know about. It is Psalm 112. It is about the excellent man. It is Mr. Far Above Rubies. It's also a poem. It is an acrostic poem. All 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are used. He is the ideal man. She is the ideal woman. Let's bring them together and refer to them as Mr. and Mrs. Far Above Rubies. And let's look at the marriage that they would make. This would be the ideal marriage. It's got all the different parts to it. So as we look into this marriage, we see, first of all, intrinsic goodness. They are good people. And they're going to be good people wherever you find them. If you're going to be a good wife, you've got, first of all, to be a good person. If you're going to be a good husband, you've got to, first of all, be a good man. Now, not much is said about this woman, except to say in verse 30 of Proverbs 31 that she feared the Lord. And it's most likely true that the writer has left this until almost last, so that you would get the idea that this fact underlies all of the previous characteristics that are mentioned. Here is a woman who really feared God, and it made a good woman out of her. We jump over to Psalm 112, where we have Mr. Far Above Rubies, and that poem begins by saying, "Praise the Lord. How blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who greatly delights in his commandments." The thing about this man is that he feared God, and he saw fearing God as being a reason why he should keep all of the commandments of God. And not only did he keep all the commandments of God, but he enjoyed doing it. He delighted in keeping the commandments of God. What is a person like who really fears the Lord? He is a person who keeps the commandments of God, and he allows that to make out of him or her a good person. You remember Solomon wanted to find out what man should do all the days of his life upon this earth, and he engaged in this quest in Ecclesiastes, and whenever we come to the end of the book, he announces the conclusion that he reached. He said in the King James translation, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. The problem with that translation is the word duty does not appear in the Hebrew text. But you have to put something in it in order to make sense for us today. But when the New King James translation came out, they changed it just a little bit to make it more in harmony with the Greek text. They had it reading, "Let us fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all." My New American Standard Translation says, "Let us fear God and keep his commandment, for this applies to everyone." My New American Standard Translation emphasizes the people, but the New King James emphasizes the character. This is man's all. And I believe that probably is the best rendering of this. What is a good man like? He is a man who fears God and keeps his commandments, and he loves doing so. He loves doing the will of God. Now let's make sure we understand what these two texts are saying. They are saying to us, if you're not a good person, if you're not keeping the commandments of God as a result of fearing God, you're not a real man. If you're not keeping the commandments of God and really fearing God, you're not a real woman. We're talking about a person who is intrinsic goodness. They are intrinsically good. They're going to be good wherever you see them, whether they're in the home, whether they're out in the vineyard, whether they're downtown, wherever they may be, they're going to be good. As we look into this marriage, we see intrinsic goodness. Secondly, as we look into the marriage, we see inspiring teamship or camaraderie. Here are two people. Both of them are good people. And let's say they've come together in marriage. They've come together as good people because they fear the Lord. They're going to make a team. And it's going to be a wonderful team. It would be about the best team you could ever imagine. And we notice that at the beginning of this poem about the excellent woman, in verse verse 11 of this text, it's all stated in one sentence. The heart of her husband trusts in her. Here's a husband who sees the qualities of his wife, and he trusts in her. He trusts her with his children. He trusts her with his money. He trusts her with his future. He trusts her with his home. He trusts in her. And whenever a husband really trusts in his wife, things are going well. And the text says he doesn't need anything else. Now, it's hard to translate this phrase, and most of the translations that I have read would say, he has no lack. It's just another way of saying he's got everything. He's got everything that he needs to be the kind of man that he ought to be. He is a good man, and he has a wife that he can trust and believe in. And you will notice in the next verse, that is verse 12, we have mention made of her part of the team. She does him good, not harm, all the days of her life. First of all, there's quality to it. She does him good. There's quality to it. Number two, there is integrity to it, not harm. And then there is continuation to it all the days of her life. Here's one of the finest teams in the world. A husband who trusts his wife and a wife who is very supportive of her husband. The husband sees a hero in her husband, and the husband sees a heroine in his wife. And those two should be able to handle anything that comes along, any trial that they're ever going to be facing. Have you noticed what Adam said whenever God presented Eve to him? This is the first time he's ever seen a woman. And whenever God performs the first wedding ceremony and gives Eve to Adam, what did he say? Did he give the grunts of the caveman, the Neanderthal man? No. He uttered a poem. It's a Hebrew poem. She is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Therefore she shall be called woman, for she's taken out of the man. From the very beginning, in all of the comments that are made about the home and the family, we see the idea of teamship. We see the idea of camaraderie. Here are two who are going to live together, they're going to work together, and they're going to face life together. So the Holy Spirit inserts, after Eve is introduced to Adam, a little comment about marriage. And in that little comment, he tells us actually what marriage is. If you haven't read this recently, you ought to look at it. There are 3 characteristics of marriage. He says, for this cause. What cause? Camaraderie. For this cause. Camaraderie. Teamship. For this cause. A man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. You get the 3 points? Leave, cleave, and believe. Marriage was created for godly people. It was not created for pagans. It was created for those who love God and know God and are going to live for God. Both Adam and Eve knew God. They were godly people. And God gave them this characteristic we call marriage or the home. And when 2 people believe, they live together, and they believe together, and they work together, and they love each other, you have the home. And it's a teamship that is unlike all other teamships in the world. There's no teamship in the world that is as vital to the world, as vital to the church, as vital to the society, as vital to the community, as is the home. The marriage that is based upon these fundamental characteristics of it. Number 2, as we look in on it, we see not only intrinsic goodness, but also inspiring teamship or camaraderie. Number 3, as we look in on it, we see invaluable parenting. Not a lot is said about the parenting of the woman. It's just said that she was a woman who feared the Lord. And it's implied at the end of the poem that her children rose up and they called her blessed because she had been a wonderful mother. But whenever we come to the man over in Psalm 112, it begins by saying, his descendants will be mighty on the earth, and the generation of the upright will be blessed. This man that fears the Lord, he's going to see to it that his children are reared to be godly people. And he's going to send them out of his home into the world, and the world is going to appreciate them. The godly people will say, oh, this is wonderful. We've got these young people coming who are godly, and they're going to help us. They're going to help us do what is right. This man is in charge of his home, and he had the kind of home that conveyed to the children righteousness and godliness. It was a place where righteousness was caught, sought, and taught. Their home revolved around the spirit of godliness, and his job was not done until he sent his children out as godly people to change the world. There are 2 levels of parenting, far be it from me to say this. Level number 1 is the physical side of it. There is physical parenting. You teach them how to live. You teach them how to be a human being. You teach them how to brush their teeth. You teach them how to run and be strong and play in the athletic world. And whenever they play basketball, we go to see them. Whenever they play football, we go to see them. We take them fishing. We do this. We have fellowship with them. That's the physical side of parenting. And it's wonderful. We certainly want to do it. How we enjoy seeing our children participate in all of these wonderful sports and so many other things. But there's the spiritual side of it. The second type of parenting would be spiritual parenting. That's when we rear our children to be godly people. This is primary. The physical is not primary. The spiritual is primary, where we not only are going to take our sons fishing, but we're going to teach them to pray. We're not only going to go with our young ladies shopping, but we're going to teach them to love the Lord. And as they grow up to be Christians, that's one of the most beautiful sights that there is on earth. It has been well said that whenever we stand before the Lord on the day of judgment, God is going to say to us men, "Let me see your wife. She was beautiful indeed whenever she came down the aisle in the wedding gown when I gave her to you. But I want to know now, is she more beautiful now than she was when she became your bride?" One of the most beautiful things on earth is a Christian woman who has developed in herself the traits of character that godliness has in it. And if God on the last day says to us, "I want to see your wife," is she beautiful now? Is she more beautiful now than she was when I gave her to you? And it could well be that the Lord will say that to us about our children. I want to see your children. Whenever they were born, everybody loved them. Everybody wants to hold a baby. Everybody wants to rejoice in a baby. There's nothing more beautiful in the world than a baby. But I'll tell you somebody who is more beautiful. And that would be a teenager who loves God and who is walking in the will of God. They are beautiful indeed. Let me see your children, and I'll show you what you've done with your life. I'll show you what you have done in your home. As we look into this ideal marriage, we not only see intrinsic goodness, we not only see camaraderie and teenship, but we see invaluable parenting. We also will see indescribable continuation or indescribable endurance. The home is built to stand. It's built for eternity. When we say "I do," we mean we're going to stay together all during the trials and difficulties that come up in our life here. And in all of this, in the midst of all of this, we're preparing each other for eternity. We're preparing our children for eternity. I had students at Harding who didn't have a history. I get to talking about the history that we have in our homes. Grew up in a Christian home, and we remember the history, and it helps us in the future. And students would come to me and say, "I don't have a history. My home was broken real early, and I don't have much of a history." Let's make sure that our homes are such that our children have a history. They can remember us praying. They can remember us doing the will of God. There is an endurance to the home that should be there for the children. The finest thing that we can do for our children is for the husband and wife to love each other. And for the children to know that my parents love each other and they're going to be around. They're going to be with me from now on. There are 3 ways that you can endure. Number 1, you can endure by becoming a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you can't have a Christian home. If you're not a Christian father, your home is missing out on one of the greatest blessings and resources that God can give. And this is something you need to do immediately. There's no time to waste. Children grow up in a hurry, and they need your influence from the very start. You need to be a Christian, number 1. And as you live as a Christian, you're living a good life, and you're shedding forth an influence on others. Now, the grandfather of Jerry Jenkins lived for 5 years after he became a Christian. And I'm sure that during those 5 years, he was sharing the life of Jesus. But think about the other years. Think about the years that preceded when he wasn't there. The text says that Timothy had a father, and he was a Greek, but his name is not given. We don't see him. He's not there. Lois and Eunice have to take over, and they have to teach Timothy to be a godly man. I don't know what happened to his father, but may this not be a characteristic of you. Are you there? Are you there when your children need you? Are you there? Are you asleep? Have you gone hunting? Have you gone fishing? Are you there when you're needed? If you're not there, shame, shame on you. Your child needs you more than anybody else in the world. And probably you're going to implant in him the desire to be a Christian. And one day he'll respond to the gospel. And as you teach him to live for the Lord, you're doing one of the finest things you can do for another human being. And Paul said in 1 Timothy chapter 5 that if a man does not honor his family properly, does not take care of them physically, I think he would also imply spiritually, is worse than an infidel. One of the worst things you can do for your children is to not be there and let them grow up on their own. But if you are a Christian, you're putting eternity in them. You're putting a tomorrow in them. Second way that you and I can endure is by doing good deeds. Our young people will remember those. They'll remember whenever you did good deeds. And then the third way is by walking with God. They need to know that you're a godly man. I looked into the eyes of a child and I saw tomorrow. Every child, unless he's killed accidentally or dies of some disease early, is going to have a long life in this world. And God said, he's my child, and I'm going to loan him to you for a while, and I want you to rear him. I want you to see that he has everything he needs, and he understands how he's to live in this world, how he's to be a godly person in this world. It's not just a time to have fun. It's a time to grow in our relationship with God. And as I do that, I am honoring what God has done for me. And whenever life is over, we'll go on. We'll live together in eternity. You say, well, Brother Eddie, you're talking about ideals. I know. We're talking about ideals. I've been talking about the ideal marriage. I've been talking about the ideal wife. I've been talking about the ideal husband. We can't arrive at the ideal, can we? No, we can't. But I'll tell you what we can do. We can have a blameless heart. A blameless heart is a person who fears God and is trying to do what's right. He's trying to be obedient to the Lord. He's trying to live a good life. You don't have to be perfect. You cannot be perfect, but you can be blameless. And whenever a couple is trying to blamelessly be a Christian home, God is going to bless it. There will be three characteristics of that blameless living. Number one, there will be the attitude of, I may have to have some help here. All right. They have the attitude of their obedience priority. They have had an obedience priority. That is, they have decided this is going to be first in my life. I'm going to be obeying God. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Rain or shine, sleet or snow, I don't care what's going on. Obedience is going to be my first priority. I won't be perfect at it, but that's what's going to be number one with me. Number two, they had a penitent spirit. I'm not going to do everything right. I'm going to make mistakes. It's not whether or not I made a mistake. It's whether or not I've repented. It's whether or not I've gotten up and I've expressed my sorrow for my failure and I've gone on. And then number three, there's going to be a persevering determination. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to stay with it. I want to tell you about this before we ask you to make a decision. George Herman Ruth. Everybody called him Babe Ruth. For, 35 years he played baseball. And he set a lot of records. One of them, he knocked 714 home runs that stood for 33 years. Hank Aaron, several years later, beat it with 755 home runs. Barry Bonds beat it, 762, but they got him for being on steroids, and that didn't count. But anyway, look at how he made a difference in the world. I understand that one time he was in a group of people, and they asked him, they said, "Babe, you've been in baseball for a long time, and I want to ask you this. What have you learned? What is the one truth that you've learned?" And Babe Ruth said, "I've learned this. You can't beat the person who never gives up." Who's going to win here? I've been talking to you. Some of you went to sleep. Some of you didn't pay attention to me. But I've been talking to you about one of the most important things on earth, your home. I've been talking to some of you men that need to change this very day. I've been talking to some of you women that may need to change this very day. Who's going to win? Who's going to have the Christian home? Who's going to have the real Christian home that's going to make a difference in the world? I'll tell you who's going to win. Those who do not give up. Those who do not quit. Oh yes, there are mistakes that we will make, but we're going to correct them, and God will help us to do better tomorrow. If you're not a Christian, this is the day. This is the day that you need to become one. If you're unfaithful to the Lord, this is the day that you need to come back to Him. And we're going to sing a song, an invitation song. We invite you to come. Remember, you can have a Christian home. While together we stand and sing.